Let me upgrade you.
How you gonna upgrade me? It's higher than number one.
So since I'm back home in Washington, D.C. now, finally, after a lot of traveling in 2012 and during the holidays, it is now 2013, and I get to rest a little bit. I never rest, but I get to actually stay in one place for a couple of weeks maybe. We'll see how things go. But while I was here, I thought I would talk a little bit about and do a quick video blog / update on something in DC, which is my home, which is a city that I love and I spend a good deal of time in just by default, and love to spend as much time as possible in because the city's great. It's clean, it's nice, it's orderly, it's organized, it's well kept. The people are great. Lots going on here. Center of power in the world, and center of my existence when I'm not traveling and trotting the globe, traveling the world and judging it along the way. So the thing that came to mind this morning when I was thinking of doing this video blog was the museums of DC. I don't just mean the museums like you're normally thinking about. What I really wanted to do a video blog on was a lot of the museums that people don't necessarily see on a first trip to DC, or sometimes even a second or third. I had a friend in town, a little someone special in town this past week, and he had been to DC before, but had not been to a couple of the places that I'm talking about here. He actually didn't go to some of those that I'm going to talk about on this trip, but hopefully a future trip I can drag him out to those. He wanted to do the tourist thing again, the tourist circuit, so we spent a couple of days going around and doing the monuments and a couple of the Smithsonians. So that's what you normally think of when you think of coming to DC and doing the tourist thing, or being a tourist. You have to go see all the monuments in the National Mall. You have to go see the Smithsonians. You want to go see, things like the White House, the Capitol, Supreme Court, Library of Congress. Those are musts when coming to DC. But after you do all that, either if you're here for a couple of days or a week or more, or on a subsequent trip, what's really awesome to do is to look up and go check out a couple of the places that have popped up over the past 10 years or so that are a little bit more specialized in terms of museums and exhibits and sightseeing here in DC. The first place that comes to mind, and one of my favorite, is the International Spy Museum. That's over in sort of the Chinatown Penn Quarter area of DC. Obviously all this stuff is easily metro accessible, but it's basically the Museum of International Espionage. It's the largest collection of spy and espionage-related artifacts and exhibits in the world, and it's a modern museum that's done really well. Incorporates a lot of visuals and digital content and stuff like that too. Good balance of sort of static printed material that you kind of read as you go through, and exhibits that you actually look at, and interactive content, great for kids as well. Fantastic for adults who are, who love spy movies or things like that. But that's a really fantastic museum to check out. It's sort of not off the beaten path because it's centrally located, but sort of off the beaten tourist itinerary, I guess you could say. Another one that opened a couple years later is the Museum of Crime and Punishment, which is sort of if the Spy Museum is the CIA, the Museum of Crime and Punishment is the FBI. So it's all about crime and mobsters and gangsters and everything the FBI deals with, basically. So that's another really cool one in the same area. There are also a lot of really cool, if you're into art, and you like to go to art museums and stuff like that, there's a couple of really neat galleries around the city that people don't tend to make it to sometimes because they're more focused on the big tourist stuff, the monuments, White House, Capitol, the main Smithsonians. There are like 400,000 Smithsonians, so a lot of people don't necessarily get to the secondary and tertiary, even Smithsonian collection of museums, much less the ones that are not Smithsonians. The Spy Museum, Museum of Crime and Punishment, a couple of others are actually private museums, so you have to pay admission to get in, unlike the Smithsonian's. But it's totally worth it for some of these because they're specialized, they're fun, they're interactive, they're just unique, and you get to see a lot of really cool collections of stuff that you don't get to see in a lot of the big public free museums. So anyway, back to art real quick. I really love the Freer and Sackler galleries, which are both Smithsonian properties, museums, but they're sort of, and they're essentially located right off the National Mall, but they tend to be not what people go to first when they're coming to DC. You tend to think of Museum of American History, Museum of Natural History, the National Portrait Gallery, things like that are the big ones that people go to first. And some of the smaller ones, which have phenomenal collections, tend to be forgotten about. So Freer and Sackler galleries are great if you're into art. They have some great Islamic art collections there too once in a while that I really like going to because I spent a lot of time in the Middle East and have come to have a great appreciation for Islamic art and architecture. So I love anytime they have an exhibit there. The Air and Space Museum is a Smithsonian museum on the National Mall. A lot of people don't know there's actually another Air and Space Museum out by Dulles Airport, so it's way out there, and it's a hike. But it can be totally worth it because they have like a Blackbird there. They have a space shuttle there, I believe, if I remember correctly. But that's another one that's worth grabbing a zip car or doing a rental car and going out there for the day to the Dulles, Virginia area and going to see that other Air and Space Museum that people forget about a lot of times because it's not on the metro, it's not in downtown DC, and normally when you think of Air and Space Museum, you think of the one that is downtown DC. And that one's amazing too. There's a lot of really cool stuff in there. But if you have some extra time and you're really into air and space stuff, the other one, I think it's called like the Udvar Hazy Museum or something like that, is really, really neat to check out. I've mentioned a couple. There are a lot of other museums and exhibits and collections in Washington, D.C. that are really neat to go see. A lot of out-of-the-way places that you don't normally think of when you come here that aren't on the typical tourist itinerary, but they're more niche and specialized, and everybody has their focus and interests and things that they like, that they're passionate about, and there's a lot of that stuff for a lot of those interests and passions and niche focuses here in Washington, D.C. if you take the time to explore and do your research a little bit. So a good trip to D.C., even if it's a short one, even if it's a first one, combines the main tourist attraction sites and monuments here, the National Mall monuments, White House, Capitol, Supreme Court, Library of Congress, and all of those are relatively compact within the center of the city. A couple of the big museums, the Smithsonian's, natural history, American history, things like that, they're all must-sees. But carve out a little bit of extra time to find some of these more niche, specialized types of sites and attractions to augment and complement a visit here so that you can mix it up a little bit and get some of the big stuff and then also get some of the cool, smaller, out-of-the-way stuff. That's a really great way to do DC. I love DC. It's my home. I love doing DC. And I just really like sharing things about the places I like with others, especially with respect to travel. So that's my video blog update for the day. I'm going to go to Starbucks.